Hello.
Hi,
I
how
am
are you,
doing
lady?
well. It's so good to have you on with us this evening.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Um, we couldn't think of a better way than to kick off the new year, 2023, than by sitting down with the amazing Jackie Reed. So I know there are so many of the members of our movement who have been looking forward to this conversation. So I'm so glad you're able to join us, Jackie.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I appreciate that. Kicking off the year with me. I
Um,
appreciate that.
so I want to say welcome. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in for tonight's Justice Now conversation sponsored by the National Urban League. I'm Jerica Richardson, and I'm your host, and I serve as a Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives here at the National Urban League. And so tonight we are focused on talking about the new year. It's 2023. We're yeah.
Come on.
Already, right?
How is it? I can't
It's
even
been a
believe it.
whirlwind. And really, to kick us off right from the beginning, we've already seen new leadership, some new challenges that have arisen in our community. And um, as we do every year, I think so many of us, when we start a new year, we focus on New Year's resolutions. And so I think, if anything, what we've seen in 2020 with COVID-19 has made us laser focused on our health. And so I want to dig
Yeah.
deeper into that during this conversation with you, Jackie, because I know you have a world of experience in not only the news and what's happening in our community, but also focusing on what we do in this new era, in this new stage of life, when we're focused not only on what's happening externally, but also what's happening internally. Um, and let me take a step back. So for those of you who are just tuning in, I want to tell you a little bit about our guest this evening. So Jackie Reed is an award-winning journalist and has really earned the trust of the American people for quite some time. She's been a journalist for over 20 years, has an expertise in not only news, but women's issues, lifestyle, and entertainment. Jackie has interviewed some of the most influential people of our generation, including, now I have to read the list because it's pretty impressive. We've had President Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Ava DuVernay, Jane Fonda, Stacey Abrams, Will Smith, Jamie Foxx, and of course, Beyonce. So um,
Well,
can't leave
okay.
her out. Jackie, we're happy to have you on because I know you are a proud graduate of Clark Atlanta University. I went to Spelman College, so shout out to CAU, the whole AUC, and
Okay.
all the HBCU folks that I know have
AUC,
joined us this
yes.
evening. Feel free to drop a line or a note in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from, and uh, put, please feel free to give a shout out to your school as well. Um, Jackie, you've obviously had a great career, and I wanted to talk to you not only about your insights on news and where we're going this year, but wanted to hear a little bit more from you about your vegan, sexy, cool brand. Now, that's an awesome name. I know folks want to know more about it, so we're going to dive into that this evening. But let's start out by talking about the federal government. We we saw another interesting midterm election with the Senate runoff in Georgia.
That's one word for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
It
I
was
would love to hear your
interesting.
thoughts. Um, but we ended the year where we saw kind of a passing of the baton from Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Representative Hakeem Jeffries. So the first woman to lead
Yeah.
the Democrats in the House, and now the first African American. What are your thoughts on that? We closed out the year, we saw more of it at the beginning of 2023, but it definitely was historic.
Well, I tell you, Jerica, and again, thank you for having me on. When the pandemic hit and we were all at home, and most everybody had to be home. We couldn't go out and about, and so we were all tuned in to what was going on with the news, right? What was going on with COVID. It was before we had a vaccine, and then George Floyd died. And then we were all tuned in. If we were not out protesting, we were tuned in, day out to what was going on in the news. It seemed like it just couldn't get any crazier. But every day it just did, right? It was like everybody was like, I didn't think this would be on my bingo card. It was like, it was something else after something else after something else. And I don't know about you, but for my mental wellness, I got to the point where I had to unplug from watching the news day in and day out, because as a journalist, you just want to take it in. And I know with what you do, and you know, I know all about you, you're also very plugged into what's going on in the news, particularly politically. But I had to unplug for a bit. And you know, as we got, you know, our vaccines, and you know, things seemed to get back to some sense of normalcy, politically things continue to be crazy across this country. And, you know, we go into a holiday season of 2022 and we think, okay, 2023 is coming, new year, we can woosah, you know, we still have a sane president in the White House. You know what I mean? Okay, we lost the House, but okay, we got the Senate, you know, and we didn't know how that was going to go in Georgia, but it turned out. And then Kristen Sinema just kind of showed up and showed out. You know, she was never really on the Democratic side anyway. But, and then, you know, we get into 2023 and then we see the craziness in Congress with the, you know, the election, or, you know, the effort to elect Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker of the House. And it was just insanity. And it speaks to what we're in for with the Republican Party being in leadership with the House as we move forward. And already with these new rules that they put out that we're learning about, you know, yesterday and today, there's much to be concerned about, you know, not just for Black Americans, but for Americans in general. If you have any sense about you, you know, we don't have to dig into that, but, you know, you can see what is happening politically, and it just gives us an indication. That whole vote, what was it, 15 votes I think it took to and what he had to give up, right? To the even, you know, I try not to use certain words, you know, to this far right extremist group like the Marjorie Taylor Greens and such, what he had to give up to people like that, who is questionable whether or not they should even be in office at all. I mean, I could see legitimate efforts to remove them, you know, from office based on their beliefs and the things that they say, particularly about the legitimacy of the election, how they're still out there questioning that. It's just un-American. But I think we are just in for a roller coaster ride, and I think we need to buckle up. You know, we cannot sit back and rest and relax, particularly Black people. We cannot do it. We just don't have that luxury. We don't have the luxury to sit back and yeah, we can make, you know, resolutions and pray for a better year, but we have to, and I know we'll talk about it a little bit later, we have to not only stay plugged into what's going on. Like I said, I had to take a step back from the news, but I didn't completely step out of it. I still was very aware of what was going on. And we have to stay educated and informed and plugged in and be a part of the process. We cannot afford to let other people fight the fight for us. We have to be a part of the fight. And a big part of that is taking care of ourselves, right? Mentally. How many people, how many news stories have we, you know, unfortunately, headlines that we read about Black people committing suicide, right? How many Black people came forward to talk about anxiety and depression, you know, with everything else that we're going on as Americans, Black Americans in this country, dealing, you know, taking care of ourselves mentally and taking care of our health, right? We have to not only have mental clarity, right, to make the best decisions for ourselves and for our families and for our loved ones, whether we're confronted with someone in a racist situation, you know, with a police officer that's not going to treat us the right way. Having mental clarity in various moments matters. And then being able to show up physically. if you've got some kind of ailment, some kind of chronic situation with your back, your legs, heart issues, respiratory issues, if you're not taking care of, can you show up at the polls, right? Can you show up at the march? Can you show up at the meeting? No, our health is our first line of defense against everything that we are dealing with. Anything that we're talking about as a people, fighting it starts with us taking care of ourselves. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway. It's the only way we can go the distance. It's the only way, because they are counting on us to count ourselves out, right? Look at what's in most of, low income, predominantly Black neighborhoods, fast food restaurants, food deserts, right? There are no healthy foods, no fruits and vegetables, no access to healthy food, right? You got to drive a long way or take the bus or travel a long way. I met a gentleman who's vegan, who did a great documentary, They're Trying to Kill Us, about veganism. And he's from Ferguson, Missouri. And he talked about, he didn't have his first he thought vegetables came from a can until he went away to college. He had never had a fresh vegetable. It was always out of a can.
Brutality.
And those are the kind
living in Ferguson.
Yeah.
That's something we're always educated on, but something as simple and as important as nutrition and access to healthy foods is something that sometimes escapes us. We are, I think, in many ways, and I think you really said this well, we are used to, and unfortunately, overeducated in the pain and the challenges and the oppression, but not educated enough in the things that will sustain us and help us actually be in a space where we can put up the fight and pursue democracy and freedoms and equity, all the things that we value, but we have to be alive and be well in order to do that.
We got to be able to show up. We have to be able to show up as our best selves. And we put taking care of ourselves on the back burner so much. If you're got that hustle mentality, I'll sleep when I'm dead mentality, which is so crazy to me. Making sure you get enough rest. Making sure that you're meditating, praying, doing, if you are a Christian, or whatever your faith is, making sure that you're leaning into something that is higher than yourself, which also feeds into our mental wellness. Taking care of ourselves is so important, but we put it on the back burner. And the way that we celebrate, right? The foods that we eat, the alcohol that we drink, right? The things that we do to celebrate, and we say to ourselves, oh, I deserve this. I deserve this. Yes. Okay. You can say that you deserve it, but we also have to think about taking care of ourselves. We have to find other ways to celebrate the wins, other ways to celebrate the good times, make healthier choices. You know what I mean? Maybe don't drink all the time. For a lot of us, alcohol is, it's medication, right? We self-medicate with alcohol and food and, food that's bad for us. That's how we self-medicate. And we have got to find, it's okay, to say, you know what, I'm going to go out and party with my friends, but I'm going to have a non-alcoholic drink, or I'm just going to have a glass of juice, or I'm just going to, and everybody's like, oh, that's what, we've got to normalize making healthy choices and being okay with it. You know what I mean? Going to having the cookout or the holiday meal with some healthy choices on the table. As always, people always say, well, macaroni and cheese or ham hocks or, chitlins or whatever we have, and the way that we cook our food, adding, those meats and all that butter and all those things that pack on calories. Well, that was from slavery. That's how our ancestors, we took scraps and turned them into, okay, maybe that's what they did now, but okay, we are so beyond slavery. We don't have to eat that food anymore. White people sit back and say, we don't have to do anything. They're killing themselves. Look at the way they eat. Look at how they don't take care of themselves. They are killing themselves. We don't have to even we don't even think about the meats that we buy. Usually we'll go to a discount meat place. It is usually the worst of the worst. Somebody says sodium. Amen on sodium.
It's on sale for a reason.
We get the meat that is the Come on, that meat is on sale for a reason. It is usually the worst of the worst. Has plastics in it, all kinds of antibiotics. Look at our young girls growing up too fast, developing too fast because of what's in the foods that we eat. Dick Gregory talked about this so much when he was alive. Nobody paid him any attention. He was a vegan for a reason. He was a vegan, I mean, way back in the 60s. And not just for, not just a vegan with what he ate, not just with the meals, but he was an ethical vegan as well, because he tied, the injustice and the violence that was going on against Black people to the way that animals were being treated. The great Angela Davis, Professor Angela Davis, same thing. She's an ethical vegan as well, because both of them said, we don't want to be a part of that violence, any kind of violence. And what happens in factory farming and all those things is uncalled for. If you let yourself do the homework, you will see. But yeah, we want to get stuff on discount, want to get food, our meats on discount and all that kind of stuff. And it's discount. What is in our communities typically is the worst.
Well, I mean, you definitely underscored that. And I will say, I'm glad that you brought up the late Dick Gregory, because I didn't know about his focus on health and veganism, unfortunately, until he passed, right? And we saw so much about his life. And so I'm glad that we are having this conversation now. You've been receiving a lot of love in the chat. A lot of people are amening and co-signing and 100 signing on to everything that you've said. And I think it's important as we start this new year to really be reflective and think about putting ourselves first in a way that we may not have been before. There's just something that I think we do, and I will say this, especially as Black women, we have, I think, almost been raised and taught that it's important to kind of carry the burdens of others on our back, and we have to save everybody.
Yes.
Quite frankly, we have some work to do in saving ourselves first. We can't save the community until we start making the change within. And so I'd be curious, I grew up watching you. You definitely inspired my early journalism career. And I know there are a lot of folks, not only in the civil rights movement, but in the journalism space that are on this call. When did you, and maybe you have been a vegan your entire life, but if you haven't, when did you make the shift, not only in your mindset, but also in your lifestyle, Jack?
It was actually, this month is my 5-year anniversary, but for years I went without eating beef or pork. I always knew that eating meat was a bad, and this was back when I was in college. I stopped eating beef or pork, beef and pork. And I really, once I got into college, once I got into graduate school, I shout out Northwestern Medill School of Journalism, I started to really focus on what was healthy and eat, and really, because a lot of us don't know, right? I thought that eating trail mix, it was one of my favorite things that I used to go, when I was living in Chicago, I would go to Wawa or different places and get scoop it out and scoop it into a little plastic bag, and I'd have my trail mix of roasted, salted nuts. That is so fattening.
Doing something good for yourself.
Nuts are good for you. I thought I was doing something good. Yeah, right? You think I'm going to eat a salad, that's going to be good. But if you drown it in creamy dressing, forget it. Just get the burger. So for me, so I was already on a path to eating healthy. But then there was this shift. I'm an animal lover. And it just didn't, I had talked to vegans before, but it just didn't click in my brain. And then one day I was watching, because people would come to me and say, I would have conversations, oh, dairy is the worst thing. They kill the male cows and turn them into the babies, and, they artificially inseminate I really grew up thinking that cows just produced milk. You know what I mean? I didn't realize that they were they were impregnated by machines, and then their babies, once they gave birth, were automatically taken away. They don't even get to have that milk so that humans can have that milk. You know what I mean? And we're not drinking dog milk or cat milk or people will hear this and they'll be like, oh, that's extreme. Oh, those vegans. But Dick Gregory, Coretta Scott King, Dexter King, Angela Davis. I stand by some great thinkers who feel the same way. We have just been programmed as a society to accept that it's okay to consume animals. It's not good for us. It's not healthy for us. And if you really do the research, you'll see that. I was looking on Facebook one day and I saw this ad featuring a Black woman, right? And I have tried to find this ad, but I can't find it, featuring a Black woman who was walking by some animal rights protesters. They gave her a pamphlet about going vegan. She looked at it and was like, but it planted a seed in her brain. And then we see her going through her life, recognizing like, oh, wait a minute, this is what happens to the rainforest and the land when they're raising animals on them. This is how they kill animals for leather and suede and cashmere and things like that. This is what they do to, and at the end of that, we see her handing out the pamphlet at the end. I don't know what, that spoke to me. And that day I said, that's it. I'm not just going to go vegan at the table with what I eat, but I am with what I wear, my hair products, my makeup, my beauty products, everything. I am now what's called an ethical vegan. So that means I don't consume, I don't buy anything, I don't contribute to any way to the abuse or consumption
Well,
of
Jackie,
animals.
thank you so much for sharing your journey. I know there are a lot of us that have been in different stages, but when we know better, we do better. So I appreciate you giving space and time to talking about these issues. And I think there's more that we need to do, not only this year, but something that we need to continue to do in our community, and really educate ourselves about what we're consuming internally, but some of the things that we're consuming, that is coming from us externally. I do want to kind of segue and talk to you a little bit more and kind of get your sense of, with all that we've seen, we started out talking a little bit about 2020, where we've been, and I want to focus on where we're going. What do you see as key priorities for the Black community in this year and years to come? We've been bombarded with issues on policing, with education. I mean, definitely talk about critical race theory. As a journalist, it's a big one. But what do you think our priorities should be for 2023? What do we need to create space and time and effort? What do we need to put our effort behind as we move forward in this year?
I think education is first and foremost. Aside from taking care of ourselves, right, and our health, I think education is key because of what our children will not be learning in schools because of this whole, fear of, they don't want white kids to feel guilty. So they're not going to teach certain things about slavery and the truth about the history of this country. And I think it's not only important that Black kids learn about the history of this country, but all children. And I think we have to find more. If they're not going to get it in the schools, with what we can do in the media, with cartoons and creating content, we need to make sure that we are educating our young people and all people and making sure that they're aware of the history of this country and also of what is going on in this country. A lot of people, things happen to them and they're not showing up because they're unaware of what's going on with gerrymandering and redistricting and all those types of things and things that we just have no idea that's happening. So I think education is key. And then I think second to that, I think that Black people have to come up with some kind of way to have a unifying plan. And I know, we're not a monolithic group, and I know that's difficult. And we have a lot of leaders and not a lot of new young leaders coming up and a lot of old legendary leaders that are still standing. And I think that we have to kind of get on the same page. We are far from the civil rights movement and the way that things were organized then, not that far from it though, right? But I think that we have to get on the same page and there has to be some kind of a unifying plan. Charles Blow, in his recent book, and the name of the book is going to escape me, but he talked about, for example, Black people reversing the Great Migration and going back to the South. And really, because that's where we can have some political power. And he compared it to, oh gosh, I'm going to forget what state in the north. Forgive my dogs, they're going to bark. But he talked about Black people really, he said if we move back down south, then we really can take control politically because we have the numbers. And so we have to start thinking like that. It really is brilliant what he laid out, and we really have to start thinking that way. You know, I don't have all the answers. I'm not a great political thinker, but we have them. We have to figure out how to come together. And, you know, I think Reverend Sharpton, and some others recently came together with a meeting of a lot of leaders. I think that we have to do more of that. We have to do more planning so that we can be effective politically. We can't just, you know, throw our weight behind the Democratic Party and just say, this is what we're going to do. We have to make sure that they are also serving us and meeting our needs as a people. But that means planning. You know, planning politically. We have to do that.
I think that's such a great point, because we have seen the rise of Black political power across the country, and absolutely in the South. We've seen more African-American mayors, more African-American women mayors, folks in Congress, obviously in Senate, when we're talking about Georgia, when we're talking about Reverend Raphael Warnock. But you're right. Often, I think if we think about the civil rights movement of the 1960s, folks really galvanized and were focused on a core mission, and we were moving in lockstep and we were moving together. And I think many of the problems and challenges that we talk about today, they're not new. They're things that we've seen before, but we do really have to think more critically and more strategically about how we leverage this power.
Erica, please forgive me. I'm not hanging up, but I have to, if I don't answer this door, they're going to rip my, just give me 1 second. I'm so sorry.
For all of those who have tuned in, thank you so much for participating in this conversation. I encourage you, if you have any comments, we've talked about a lot of things today. We've talked about political power. We've talked about new leadership. We've talked about some of the challenges that our communities face. We've talked about health and how important that is in our journey. Feel free to share any comments that you have or questions for Jackie in the chat. No problem. You have your friend with you, Jackie?
Yes, girl. I have to manage many things. As those of us who do things from work, when you work from home, it's many things that you have to juggle. I don't have children, but I have dogs.
Well, I love it. Look, dogs deserve our time and attention and love too. And so, I mean, look, I think so many of us are in this space where we are multitasking, where we are trying to do our part. We're trying to have an impact, but we're also just trying to show up every day, be our authentic selves, and also keep the lights on. I mean, there's so much that's on our plates. And I do want to ask you, because, I mean, I think a lot of my friends will be upset and others if I didn't. You know, you've had such a great career. You've experienced, you know, so many things. You've met so many people. Just thinking back on your journey in journalism, is there any advice that you would have for young journalists or even just young leaders who are kind of starting out in their careers or trying to make that transition from a mid-tier person to an executive? I think there's all these different pitfalls that we encounter. And sometimes folks don't tell us what they've gone through or share the advice. We hear about it after we've bumped our head. And so if there's anything or any advice that you'd want to share with young journalists that are in the movement and doing the work, we'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I would say to young journalists or people who want to kind of go in this direction and work, because a lot of people transition from other careers into journalism, but particularly the young people, because I mentor a lot of young journalists. I would say, because of how media is moving, right? We see, even with CNN, you know, with the ownership of it, it's moving in a more conservative direction. Even with MSNBC, back when, you know, before Trump became president, and then after there was a lot of coverage of Trump, a lot of decisions that are being made, I think, by executives that I think we have to kind of make sure that we are putting our energy into informing Black people. You know, Black newspapers are dying. Black radio is dying. Where are we going to get our information? We have to make sure that, you know, it's not just everybody. When I meet young journalists, they want to be on camera. What do you want to do? I want to be an anchor. I want to be on camera. But the decisions are made by the managing producers, by the executive producers, by the people in sales, by the general managers, by the presidents of network. Like, we've got to aspire to those positions as well, because that will dictate what is covered and how it's covered. So I would say, you know, aspire not just to be in front of the camera, but also learn how to do other things in a newsroom so that you can have a voice in management. And then second, I would also say, you know, I look at Roland Martin and what he has created, and I'm so proud of him, because, you know, we need more of that. We need more truth tellers putting information out there that the Black community needs. I mean, BET is an entertainment network. TV One is an entertainment network. You know, they don't really have daily news. It's unfortunate, but, you know, they can run their companies the way that they please. But we've got to make sure that we have ways to get information to our community that we need. You know what I mean? It can't all be about celebrities. You know, the most popular things on YouTube and on Instagram is all about celebrity gossip, and Black people, you know, we love leaning into gossip. Well, we need to find a way to elevate what's going on, information that we need, so we can pick the right candidates, right? So we can, like, who's your district attorney? You know, we always talk about presidential elections and these national elections, but it's the local elections that really make a difference. And a lot of us don't even know, right? We don't even know who's on the ballot for these elections. And so we've got to lean in. We've got to go to the city council meetings. We got to go to the PTA meetings. You know, even if you don't have kids, you can still show up at PTA and be a voice in those meetings. We have to show up, right? And we have to educate. We have to figure out a way to create programming and content that's educating our people. Yes, somebody said the Black News Network was good. It was great, you know, and now Byron Allen has taken over that. It is now the Griot. They have, you know, my friend Mark Lamont Hill is on there. Ebony K. Williams is on there as well. But it, you know, it's those, I think there might be one other show, you know, it's growing. They're starting from scratch. But see, there's with the buying power that Black people have, right? How did a Black network, you know, go under, right? We've got to.
If we say these things are important, you know, we have to put our time, our energy, our money behind them. We have to support it ourselves.
Come on, we have, and our voices. If we don't talk about it, you know, we got to be about it, right? I mean, nobody's going to. We have to do it for ourselves, and we've got all these, you know, Black billionaires now, and millionaires, and celebrities, and others with a lot of money. When I talked earlier about organizing. You know, back in the day, right? Harry Belafonte, Muhammad Ali, they all put it back into the community. And everybody may not want to do that, but I don't think we have that luxury, right? We have to have a plan, and we can fund that plan with the money that a lot of those who have a lot of money, you know, we can fund that with that money. And all of us can give money, you know, $5, $10 here and there makes a difference, but we've got to figure out a better way to educate our people and get the information that we need. I know that was a lot to answer the question about advice for young journalists, but I feel like we're losing our Black news. You know what I mean? And just having a Black host or anchor doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get the news that we need.
That's so important. I think oftentimes we talk about, oh, journalism is about truth telling. It absolutely is. It's about telling our stories. It absolutely is. But if we're not at the decision-making tables, if we're not in the spaces where we can call the shots, then how much truth, how much of our story are actually being told? And so I think that was such an important point to lift up. And I think, quite frankly, it's applicable to not only the journalism industry, but it's applicable to education. It's applicable to government and politics and business and everything we do. I think that's a great way, I think, to end this conversation and thinking about 2023. We have to put more effort and time and do the work in the game, because otherwise we'll be talking about historic moments that we celebrate. Maybe not, we don't celebrate necessarily the right way. We're talking about with food and alcohol and all the other things, but we have these celebratory moments, and then things go back down to business as usual. So how do we break the cycle of, small or monumental upticks, but how do we have sustained progress? And Jackie, I agree. I don't think we'll have it unless we make sure that we are at these decision-making tables everywhere. And I think our media, our journalists have a huge role in that. And sometimes it can be challenging. There's sometimes we see a backlash when we have journalists that are willing to spew facts and tell the truth, and sometimes say things that may not be popular with one segment or another. But without them, I don't see how we have progress. I don't see how we move forward. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to give you another minute if there's anything else that you want to share. It has been a great, exciting conversation. I think a great way to kick off the new year. Sometimes we can get so caught up in the weeds that we miss the big picture. And so thank you for helping us be reflective and focus on ourselves this year, but focus and reminding us that focusing on ourselves and our health, our mental, our physical well-being is how we will be able to advance and pour into our community.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't say it enough, paying attention, being conscious consumers, that's where it is. That's what we really have to lean into. What are we buying? What are we putting in our bodies? What are we putting on our bodies? Black women and the hair care out there, how many toxins are in that nail polish that you have, that gel, the hair, the perm, right? All of it, the lotion that you're wearing, what's in it? You know what I mean? And just really reading labels, the food that you're buying, what's in it? How many preservatives and different things like that are in the food. Stop eating so many processed foods. Stop eating so much sugar. The sodas. I mean, come on, stop it with the soda and the juice. If you're drinking juice, from the grocery store and it's not fresh squeezed, what are you doing? You might as well just get a bag of sugar and pour it in some water and just drink that. I mean, we've got to be more conscious consumers, because if we don't pay attention to how we participate with what we bring in our homes, what we put in our bodies, then we are part of the problem. We're part of our own problem. We are getting in our own way by not paying attention to what's in our neighborhoods. What do we have access to? It just, all of those things. I just say conscious consumerism. That's a good place to start. Just starting with paying attention to what you're buying. How was it made? Fast fashion is such a big thing, for women. I can get something that looks good. I can get it fast and I can get it cheap. How was it made? Where will it end up? How long will it last? Landfills are the clothing and accessories are the #2 thing filling up landfills across this country. And fast fashion is a big part of that.
In it,
we gotta be
people that probably look like us.
Come on.
People probably,
yes.
Where are those too, right?
Right?
How are we doing things? We're just thinking about what's great and what's good, or what feels good for right now. But I think we have to go a little bit deeper in some of the decisions we make. Yeah.
All connected. It's all connected. It is all connected.
Well, Jackie, thank you so much for joining us. I think we got so many pearls from this conversation. I know I've been writing notes myself. So we really appreciate you. really kicking off the new year with us. And I want to thank all of our viewers for tuning in. We have a lot of work to do, you all, but it's important that we put ourselves, put our communities first. And by working together, by doing that, by centering the work, the mission, but also our livelihoods, our lives, our families, our friends, our communities, I think we'll move into a healthy space, not only in our personal lives, but hopefully one for this nation and for our community. So thank you so much for joining us. Remember, the time for justice is always now. Jackie, thanks so much. Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Jerica.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year.